Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today I am talking about YouTube because we have to ask the question, is YouTube's AI racially profiling? And I found this really interesting, and here's what's going on. And this is actually coming from the Hollywood Reporter of all things, but I think it's an interesting topic, and I think it's something that society in general really needs to discuss. But here's what's going on. A group of African American content creators has launched basically a class action against YouTube and its parent company Alphabet for allegedly violating various laws intended to prevent racial discrimination. Interestingly enough, this lawsuit is pretty much challenging some of the immunities that YouTube has under the Section 230 Act, under Section 230 rather, of the Communication Decency Act, which has been in the news, over the last couple of weeks, thanks to President Trump, basically saying that he'd like to repeal that and all of that. And so we'll get into that, but let's go back to the complaint, because the complaint objects to the way in which YouTube is employing artificial intelligence, algorithms, and other filtering tools. Now, the site basically uses these tools to help viewers screen out potentially mature content, but the plaintiffs here say that by employing a quote-unquote restrictive mode, this actually acts as an improper censor. Now, the complaint also adds that their system is basically rife with quote-unquote digital racism, where users are essentially profiled on race, identity, and viewpoints. The plaintiffs are also saying that this interferes with their ability then to monetize their content. They allege that YouTube's conduct is, and I quote, intentional and systematic, regardless of whether defendants are motivated by ideological animus towards Black and members of other protected racial classifications under the law. Now, the suit also alleges that YouTube is applying this restricted mode to videos titled or tagged with the abbreviations like BLM for Black Lives Matters, or KKK, interestingly enough, for Ku Klux Klan, and also ones that use terms like racial profiling or police shooting or Black Lives Matter, and those also include names of individuals killed by law enforcement, as we've obviously seen in George Floyd in the last month or so, and also videos titled or tagged with names like Bill Cosby or Louis Farrakhan. Now, even if these videos didn't include profanity, drug use, depict sexual activity or violence, or include specific details about events that resulted in death, or feature content that is gratuitously incendiary or demeaning towards an individual or group, the restricted mode is allegedly applied to this, and obviously pulling these things back. So the suit is also targeting other alleged practices of YouTube, ranging from shadow banning, which we've heard in the case of Twitter, where you're not necessarily preventing the person from posting whatever it is they're posting, it's just not reaching a wider audience. And basically they're also talking about what's excluded on the trending and up next video recommendation lists, meaning those videos that they are putting out there, let's say for BLM or Black Lives Matter, or I guess KKK or Bill Cosby or Louis Farrakhan and everything else in between, are basically not being tagged and put in the trending or up next, which basically means that is restricting then the viewership that video may have. Now, according to YouTube, its automated systems aren't designed to identify race. And so that actually, I think, is really interesting, and we're going to see where this goes. But to dive deeper into this, we now have to understand how this is basically going to attack the Section 230 protection that YouTube enjoys. Now, the original intention of Section 230 was to encourage digital services to moderate, but in some political quarters, and in this case, according to polling, the conservative side of the political spectrum, moderation is now being equated to censorship, and these digital sites are basically facing fire for how they are moderating this in this way. So, for example, there's been the issue over Twitter's decision to fact-check some tweets by President Trump, and by virtue of that, his supporters as well as the president are claiming censorship, even though the tweet itself wasn't taken down or it wasn't banned in any way, and basically the researchers and the general public have still been able to see it. So the tweets, for example, that President Trump put out, I believe one of them was about mail-in voting, that Twitter fact-checked, everybody could still see it. They didn't take it down. They didn't remove it. Twitter's just saying, hey, let's get more information on this. And by virtue of that moderation, if you will, for that is the term, now basically President Trump and his supporters are claiming censorship by virtue of that. Now, conversely, some liberals believe that, and again, also according to polling and research, just as the original claim on the conservative side is that social media platforms actually aren't doing enough to target things like hate speech and actually blame Section 230 immunities for inaction on this. And so we have it both ways here. And obviously, this isn't the first time that platforms, but specifically YouTube, has actually been in the hot seat on both sides of the political aisle thanks to issues like this. And so the first case that we are going to talk about here is actually against YouTube that was brought by PragerU, and they claim that their conservative videos were not being treated the same as, let's say, corresponding liberal ones from another outfit like PragerU. Now, the suit claimed, the PragerU suit claimed that a First Amendment, that they had a First Amendment violation, but this lawsuit was actually rejected this past February in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, that agreed that YouTube is a private forum, not a public one, which is subject to First Amendment scrutiny. Basically, YouTube can do whatever the heck they want in that sense, and so by virtue of that, here we are. Now, the second case, which is actually still ongoing, is actually one that's quite similar to this latest racial discrimination case that I just talked about, and it was filed last year by LGBTQ YouTubers and alleges, among other things, that videos and channels with the terms gay, bisexual, or transgender in the title are being unfairly targeted. Now, basically, at the time of that filing, a YouTube spokesperson denied that its systems were restricted based on this criteria, and earlier this month, a California judge held a hearing on a motion to dismiss and was actually hesitant on allowing it to proceed where racial discrimination occurs. Was hesitant, I'm missing my notes here, was hesitant on allowing it to proceed given the precedent that was actually set by PragerU. So because PragerU was dismissed, the judge was looking at it in this way. And so then again, the judge provided a hypothetical where racial discrimination occurs against a content creator. The judge asked whether it be immunized under basically Section 230, allowing digital services in good faith to restrict access to objectionable material. And she says, and I quote, this is actually Google's attorney, YouTube's attorney, and I quote, "I can imagine some courts taking the position that a properly pleaded claim of the sort that you describe as sort of facial race discrimination claim may not be in good faith." And so I think that's actually a very, very interesting thing. But what makes the LGBTQ YouTuber case all the more intriguing is that the Department of Justice intervened in this case just last month to defend the constitutionality of Section 230. And so in doing so, the government lawyers told the court, and I quote, "Section 230 does not regulate or limit plaintiffs' primary conduct, such as their expressive activities. For example, plaintiffs do not allege that Section 230 prevents them from creating videos or posting them on the internet. And so by virtue of that, they can create and post all they want. Therefore, it is YouTube's choice whether they restrict that content in whatever way they see or just let it go and trend and whatever that is." And I find this to be a very interesting thing because this is not the first time that we've got basically two real issues going on here. One of those things is how we train artificial intelligence, because the first lawsuit that I talked about here, the most recent one from this group of African Americans saying that they are being discriminated against, and YouTube saying that is not the case, YouTube may not necessarily know that they have an inherent bias, in their artificial algorithm, their AI, their artificial intelligence algorithm is what I meant to say. My third TED Talk was actually on this, about how we can use technology to possibly defeat prejudice. I literally did that one last year. And facial recognition is one of those things where the development of it has not necessarily been inclusive of all races, genders, types, and all of that. I don't care where you are on the political spectrum, but the more diversity we have in training an AI, the more accurate it's going to be in discerning good from bad, in terms of, let's say, content or other things. And so it may actually have a bias that YouTube just doesn't realize at the moment. And that is something that could possibly be addressed, through testing and all of that. And this may be the test case to basically show in court why we've got an issue with artificial intelligence that really needs, to be improved on. And the second thing that we have to talk about is Section 230. And as I've mentioned before, Section 230 is actually one of those things where, it gives you the ability, short of posting something grossly illegal, it allows you to post whatever you want on a social media platform, YouTube, Facebook, etc., and they are basically absolved from any wrongdoing that you do. So let's say you are a member of the KKK, for example, and you were putting out horrific things, out there, but you're not necessarily breaking the law. You couldn't sue, or let's say you're against the Klan, you couldn't sue YouTube or Facebook or whoever for that, because they're just a platform. But they're also a private platform, and so how they moderate that tends to be up to them. And this is where we get into trouble, because are they actual town halls, where you should be able to post anything you want and have it go viral or not, depending on if people are interested in your message or not? Or is this a platform that can be moderated based on, let's say, the political outviews, whims, understanding of the leadership of that platform? And where we have a serious problem with this is that because tech has shaken out in the last 10 to 15 years, we now have major players that basically rule the different verticals of technology. If you're going to post a video and you're going to go free and wide, you're going to put it on YouTube in the same way I am. You are probably, if you are watching this, watching it on YouTube, even though I am linking it into various social media platforms. In the same way that Facebook has no natural competitors, nor could Mark Zuckerberg answer that question when he was in front of Congress in 2018, and still hasn't given a satisfactory answer to that. So when we are talking about this, if they are the only game in town, meaning, okay, I can go sign up for a small platform that has 4 million people on it and none of my friends, and Facebook has 3 to 4 billion people on it and all of my friends, that's what we're talking about. So by virtue of that, is Facebook then an open town forum, or does it need moderation? And then when we look at that, then we have to talk about what moderation actually is. Is this a way to combat demonstrably false news that spreads like wildfire on a platform like Facebook or possibly YouTube? For example, that Plandemic video that was derided about a month or two ago. And again, I don't care about your politics if you think it's right or wrong. It's just an example here. And I think these are things that we need to answer. And if we can't answer these things, and we are moderating these things, or we are locking these things down, or rather YouTube and Facebook or whatever their leadership is, for whatever reason or impetus they have to do that, I think that's something that would then require some kind of transparency to ensure that everybody has a fair shot at actually using the platform. And so, for example, back in the day, prior to social media and all of this, if you look at the bipartisanship, for example, in the United States Congress, both sides would typically agree that we absolutely do have a problem. Both sides might have a different solution on how to solve that problem, but at the end of the day, both recognize that both sides are basically looking at the greater good and acknowledging this, and we seem to be getting away from that, and social media is allowing us to build that wedge essentially unchecked. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, you tell me, but that's where we're at right now. And so I think it's very important that we are discussing YouTube in a lawsuit like this, because it opens up a much greater problem that a lot of people I don't necessarily think understand. They may know we have a problem, but I think this is the foundation of it, and it's something we need to address. And I know this has gone on long, and thank you for bearing with me, but it's a very important topic, not trying to get heady on a Friday afternoon, but here we are. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well, which hopefully will trend this video. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, guys.